So good evening, everybody. It's incredible. It's been a year already, and we are here again. D'Annunzio. A new perspective this evening, I hope, for everybody, for Italian listeners. Last year with the group, we talked about as a theater writer, but this year I wanted to focus on the group itself, on his connections with the Victorian art illustrators and what he did when he was very young and he was living in Rome. And he created a very enchanting book, let's put it like that. So you can have a glimpse here on the right, what we are going to talk about. I'm sure you will appreciate it. I'm sure you like it. So, slide. It's a bit slow. I hope you can see it. Okay, I hope here it is. Okay, so Gabriele, very short biography of Gabriele. Gabriele was born in the Abruzzi region in 1863, sort of still celebrating his birthday because it is on the 12th of March. Wrote, as I said before, poems, novels, plays. He was a multifaceted writer, and he lived in many different places in Italy, in Rome, in Naples, in Venice. Figure, a military the First World War, and he led the Arditi army in Fiume. Um,
Emmanuela, I'm sorry to break in. We're
no
having
problem.
trouble. You're dropping out. Your audio keeps dropping out. I think it's your
That's
connection,
it.
perhaps. Yeah. So we're
Hmm.
missing, you go, we hear a phrase and then we lose a phrase.
Oh, I don't really know what to do because the
You'd
connection
have
seems
to,
stable.
the connection seems stable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to do because it's going out completely, which means it's not your microphone. There's no static or anything, but
Okay.
we're losing your voice every few phrases, just to let you know.
Better now. Let me just check.
We'll find out over time. Go right ahead.
Okay. If it does again, please stop me again. What I can do, maybe I can change my PC.
Okay.
Okay. So he sort of retired on lay guard at the Vittoriale degli Italiani. Book itself, and we can still witness it because it's a house actually visit and it's open to the general public. He is known in Italy as the Vat, major poet laureate. So just to give you the dimension of which is still huge these days. Tonight, I'm going to focus your attention on the years that he spent in Rome. D'Annunzio arrived in Rome in 1881. As a student, actually, was about to start university. He had just finished his secondary school in Tuscany. He studied in Prato after having left the Abruzzi region. His father didn't particularly like the idea of him remaining in Pescara. He wanted his son to be more international, and so he sent him to the major Italian cities to complete his studies. D'Annunzio, however, never graduated. He never obtained his degree, but he spent 10 years in Rome, which are the years I focus about in my studies, because I think they are possibly maybe one of the most important and interesting periods in his life, because he was this poet to be, and he was deciding what he would become in his life, and also making connections in Rome that would last throughout his life. In particular, when he arrived in Rome, as I said, he didn't graduate, and but he was a very sought after socialite, and he met the most important people of the period in the capital city, one of which was Prince Maffeo Sciarra, who was about to build a very famous gallery in the city center of Rome. I am sure some of you might have seen it. It is on the top left. I like this picture because it gives you the idea that the gallery is very huge and you cannot see the ceiling very well and you cannot see all the wonderful decorations, whereas it's very cozy and tiny and you can visit it no problem because it's open almost all day long. Um, when the nuncio lived in Rome, not only the prince decided to build the gallery, but he also put inside it the offices of the headquarters of two important magazines, La Tribuna and Cronaca Bizantina, and also asked the nuncio to collaborate with with the magazines, and become the director. Um, when he was the reporter of the main events of the city. He went to concerts, he went to exhibitions, and there is also, I would say, a legend, but maybe it is true, that one of the couples that are depicted inside the gallery is, in fact, as you can see just below the gallery picture, D'Annunzio trying to court a girl who was not his wife. D'Annunzio is also very well known to these days for having been a sort of tombeau de femme. He was very liked by women and he liked them very much. So we're not 100% sure that it is him because the painter of the gallery, who is Cellini, decided not to paint him very well in order for him not to be recognized immediately by his wife in case this scene was true and happened in real life. D'Annunzio, as I said, met all the most famous artists of the period, particularly he was introduced to many of them by Count J.J. Primoli, who is with him here in the picture on the bottom left, and also to all those artists who were going to the Caffè Greco, which is still in the city center of Rome, still open. You can still go and visit it. Um, and I also included a picture of how it looked like, not during the Nuncius period, but a few years before, almost a century before. And it's the picture you can see on the small picture you can see on the right. I also included here the front page of La Tribuna Illustrata, which was published by the same Prince Maffei that I mentioned before. And you can see here it also included an illustration of D'Annunzio and how he looked like when he was in his 20s in Rome. So, while in Rome, he met a girl who was about to become his wife, and she was called Maria di Gallese, Maria Ardoin. The girl came from an aristocratic family, so the nuncio wasn't well seen by the family itself, but they got married anyway, and they got married inside the Palazzo Altemps, or the Altemps Palace, which today hosts the museum, the Roman National Museum. They also had, once they married, an apartment inside the palace that they never lived in. And I photographed it for you. It is the two pictures that you can see on the top left. They never lived there because, as I said, the nuncio wasn't particularly well seen by the family. So even if they created also some furniture for them, you can see it always on the left, but at the bottom you can see there is a door with G and M written on it. But it was just a way to welcome them very shortly after the wedding, but then they decided to go and live somewhere else. Maria at the time was also pregnant with their first baby, so you can imagine the scandal, and they couldn't really live here for a long period of time. I also included a picture I took inside the palace of the chapel where they got married. Um, It's a very famous chapel for D'Annunzio scholars because we know that during the wedding they were practically left by themselves. There was nobody to attend the ceremony. It was a very sad one, and so it is remembered for having been very dark, very gloomy. On the right, you can see the picture of Gabriele, which I am sure you are already familiar with by now, and a very nice portrait of his bride, Maria, made by Antonio della Gandara, and beneath their wedding record for the day, where unfortunately you cannot see the signatures, but they are there. So when in Rome, he was a very famous reporter, but he also found time to get married, and then we'll see what happened afterwards. Maria, anyway, was not a silent figure in his life. He was very good friends with his Roman friends as well, and particularly with who is considered to be the most important pre-Raphaelite painter of the period, who is Giulio Aristide Sartorio. And she was sort of the protagonist of a very famous triptych, which is today in Rome at the Modern Art Gallery. It is, anyway, a triptych which travels a lot, and I'm sure many of you have already seen it in different exhibitions all over the world. The last time it was here in Italy again, but in a different city. It was in Forlì last year for the major Pre-Raphaelite exhibition. It is a triptych, of course, that you can see on the left, and it's called Vergini Savie e Vergini Stolte. It is the parable of the wise and foolish virgins, which is one of the parables of Jesus, where you have 10 virgins awaiting a bridegroom. 5 have brought enough oil for their lamps for the wait, while the oil of the other 5 runs out. The 5 virgins prepared for the bridegroom's arrival are rewarded, of course, while the 5 who went to buy further oil miss the bridegroom's arrival and are disowned. Metaphorically, they are prepared for the day of the judgment. So this is the parable itself. It was very famous for many artists of the time. I think about William Blake's version, for example, which is now in Tate Britain. But what Sartorio does here is something a bit different because this was commissioned in 1890 by Count J.J. Primoli, who we saw before in the picture with D'Annunzio, as a wedding gift for his bride-to-be. However, the nobleman never picked it up due to the failure of the marriage, which is why he also didn't pay for it. So here you can see the wise virgins on the left and the foolish virgins, of course, on the right. The first are waiting with lamps burning. The second are distracted and bearing extinguished lamps, respectively paired with olive trees on the left, which are fruit-bearing trees, and pine trees on the right, which are fruitless trees. They move towards the center of the scene, where a half-open door leads to the groom's luminous room, surmounted by winged angels, and only the wise virgins can enter the room. There are many letters written by Sartorio in the Count Primary archives, which are in the city center of Rome, still inside the Primoli Palace. And it is possible to deduce by these letters that the gestation of the painting was very complex and that Sartorio used, as the pre-Raphaelites, a wealth of iconographic sources, emphasizing the theme of female virtues and getting inspired by medieval models, as well as Giuseppe Cellini's decorations of the Sciarra gallery, which we see before. What he did is that he decided to include Maria, D'Annunzio's wife, inside the painting. Not only he did that in 1890, he also decided to create a painting of just the model that you can see on the right. The painting is also in Rome in the Modern Art Gallery, and you can see on the bottom, sorry, on the top right, the very moment when Sertorio was taking her measures in order to depict her on the canvas. The year after, Sertorio also sold a drawing. He was commissioned a drawing, and again he painted Maria with one of the other virgins. As you can see, he decided to spin the picture, and so you can see her from the other side. And they are all in Rome now. So Maria was actually an active friend of the artist who revolved around D'Annunzio. But D'Annunzio himself was particularly influenced by one pre-Raphaelite artist, most of all the others, because Dante Gabriele Rossetti would come back throughout Gabriele D'Annunzio's life in many different ways and in many different occasions, especially one, which is the book we're going to discuss tonight. But throughout his life, he always loved Dante Gabriele Rossetti more than any other pre-Raphaelite. He also wrote a poem actually dedicated to one of Dante Gabriele Rossetti's most famous paintings, I think, which is Beata Beatrix, painted in 1872. And D'Annunzio, excuse the translation, but it's mine, so please forgive it if it's not perfectly in rhyme, but it is dedicated to the painting itself. Sometimes, while I'm weak, on the night of my grief, a sudden light opens and candidly lights the cold, allowing it to become night. Do not thou come, O sister, to this night, bringing the pity of thy light? The soul rises, then a dream shines in her, fleeing like lightning into the night. Oh, remember when from my blood she seems to rise like a cloud, of glory like a whirlwind of joy, when all my youthful blood sang her rising in clouds of anemones, in high flames of joy. What he did, apart from these verses, is he tried to sort of create a celebration of what Dante Gabriele Rossetti and the pre-Raphaelites meant for him. Imagine that we are now in 1886 Italy, and D'Annunzio is only 23, so a boy. But he wants to celebrate what he has seen arriving from Britain in particular, which were the illustrated books. Uh, they weren't a tradition in Italy, so D'Annunzio was a pioneer in this. He decided to use his position inside the Tribuna magazine to create a book which was supposed to be out for the summer readings, but actually was published at Christmas because he was never happy with the outcome. He decided to write a poem and illustrating it as he had seen in the British books. But it was one of the very first times in Italy. And as far as I know, probably the only example of the period to be so well refined and so accurate. So he published a series of poems called Isaotta, Guttadauro, and other poems, which you can see on the right, but on the bottom left. I decided to include immediately in this first slide about the book the Lady Clara by Giuseppe Cellini, which of course was painted for the book in 1886, and the Lady Lilith by Dante Gabriele Rossetti, which was painted, one of the times was painted in 1873. To show you that not only he chose some of the most important artists to illustrate the book of the time, but he also decided to honor the pre-Raphaelites with some paintings which would remind people of the pre-Raphaelites, reminding people of today as well, because the audience of the time might not know the paintings as well as he did because he went to exhibitions, because he was friends with the main artists of the time, because he knew Sartorio very well, and so they might have talked about them. On the top left, I included the new version of Isaotta, which I have just published. So you can notice that I decided to keep on the cover a wonderful painting that we're going to see afterwards to keep the atmosphere of the time. So, when did the infatuation with Dante Gabriele Rossetti begin? He began a few years before, when he was still at college, and he read an article by a very famous Italian British very British expert called Enrico Nencioni, who wrote an article, I think one of the first articles to be so complete about Rossetti published in Italy at the period. And he compared mainly two paintings, Lady Lilith and Beata Beatrix. About Lady Lilith, he said, the white-clad Lady Lilith is seated before the mirror, combined the mass of gold of her magnificent hair. She was an indifferent air, resting in the quiet contemplation of her perfect beauty. Her somewhat languid eyes have no passion in their gaze, and her imperial forehead is smooth as alabaster. She knows that beauty such as hers equals genius and strength, truth and virtue. It knows itself to be all-powerful. She is enraptured by her perfection. She is the siren, the sorceress, the triumphant Venus. Then he goes on and talks about the Beata Beatrix. Is the Virgin consoled by tragic sentiment, by the mystical ecstasies of an ideal passion? Her body is exhausted, and life seems to have taken refuge in her heart. Fainting and dying, she appears to Dante in a twilight light. The abundant volume of her hair makes the pallor and exhaustion of her face stand out even more. From above descends a fantastic bird, carrying in its beak the funeral flower of sleep. From the balcony, one can glimpse a tremulous light of Florence, already close to being widowed by her angel. It is the real Beatrice Portinari, the Florentine youth loved and sung about by Dante Alighieri, who speaks to our hearts in this painting by Rossetti. Paintings which weren't included in the article, so D'Annunzio could imagine them, thanks to Nencioni's words. But the infatuation of D'Annunzio for the pre-Raphaelites also went through a very deep love for Amatadima and the classic revival, which he discovered particularly during a world exhibition in Rome, as you can see it on the left, the Esposizione di Belle Arti, in 1883, where he could see one painting in particular which caught his attention, the sculpture gallery on the right, painted in 1874. And so he decided to write an article about it himself, which can be considered the first article that D'Annunzio wrote on pre-Raphaelite or classic revival British art in particular. It is now part of a book which is called Pagine sull'arte, Art Pages. And this is how he remembers the painting. The figure of a goddess I would like to have before me, painting on a strip of ivory, tall, straight, in a rosy robe that suggests nudity. She seems to have leapt out of a marvelous piece of alabaster. She's radiant. The pure head, the pure mouth, the pure eyes rise as if in a kind of flaming nimbus. The serene enjoyment of contemplating a work of art animates her face. She gazes, resting her hand on the head of a young boy. A sway of abandonment invades her, an unknown vibration disturbs her. He doesn't know he's talking about Almatadema's wife, who modeled for the picture, but we know now. So, what were the other influences that he also decided to put in his Isaotta Guttadauro? Well, of course, On the left, you can see one of the main influences of the time for artists all over Europe, and I would say all over the world. These are the illustrated poems by Tennyson. So when he published Isaotta Guttadauro, he had this specific book in mind. Of course, he stated it. He said that he wanted his book to be as beautiful as this. He was thinking, he was always thinking in a very pioneeristic way. And he did here as well. While he was in Rome, he certainly met Mary Spartali Stillman and her family. So they sort of influenced each other more than we know and more than the historical studies of the time say. But we know that, for example, D'Annunzio was very taken aback by her painting, the Enchanted Garden that you can see on the right, which was painted in 1889, and that almost certainly suggested D'Annunzio the verses that I'm going to read for you. They are taken for the paradisiac poem published in 1893, which said, "A closed gardens, barely glimpsed or long contemplated through gates, which no hand ever opened to the wayfarer, lost as in a dream." So we now know almost surely that these verses were influenced by her painting because they met each other, and through Mary, he certainly came to know the pre-Raphaelites even better than he did before. Maybe he wasn't particularly happy about it because the Isaotta book was already published, but we know the influence now. But it was Dante Gabriel Rossetti that he kept on going back throughout his life. As you can see, a very clear example here before we go back to the Isaotta book. On the left, the very famous The Daydream by Dante Gabriel, which was painted in 1880. And on the right, you have the first page of the theater play Francesca da Rimini, written by D'Annunzio in 1902. And this is an illustration by Adolfo De Cararis, who illustrated many books by D'Annunzio throughout his life, especially after the beginning of the 20th century. You can see the pose of the model in the middle. It's exactly the same as Jane Morris, depicted by Dante Gabriele Rossetti. She's also, of course, keeping a book in her hand because it's Francesca da Rimini we're talking about. She's surrounded by love and she's surrounded by roses, which have a very symbolic meaning for D'Annunzio. So he decided together with his illustrators which symbols to include in the drawings or pictures that he would include in his books. This instead is one of the first pictures we're going to see taken from the Isaotta Guttadauro's poems. Again, D'Annunzio decided to include a tribute to Rossetti. You can see on the right the original painting by Rossetti, The Question, depicted in 1882, and on the left, the illustration that D'Annunzio wanted to include in the Isaotta in 1886. This is the moon and moonlighting. Giuseppe Cellini was chosen to be the head painter for the book, and so he paints a tribute to Dante Gabriel and chooses to imitate the figure, the way the light poses on the figure, and also the facial expression. But it is not only Dante Gabriel that D'Annunzio wanted to pay tribute to, because he wanted his book to be a pre-Raphaelite gallery, portable pre-Raphaelite gallery. Let's call it like that. And so he had many more models to include. One, of course, is John Everett Millais, and he chooses to depict a new version of Mariana. The Millais version was painted in 1851, and he asks one of the painters, Alfredo Ricci, to paint Il Dolce Grappolo, to open the book. So, because she opens the book, sorry, she also opens the window, which is the opposite, of course, of what Mariana does in John Everett Millais' book, because he wants the reader to go inside the book and also maybe to remember the pre-Raphaelite original painting, but to giving it a new twist. And that's why I decided to put it on my cover as well. Then he goes on. Here we have Giulio Aristide Sartorio again, and we have Isaotta nel bosco, Isaotta in the woods, which of course has many different literary references. We can think about Millet's Ophelia, which was depicted in 1851, but also we can think about the influences which it had afterwards with Waterhouse, for example, the late Pre-Raphaelite and the Lady of Shalott. As you can see, D'Annunzio always chooses to have the flora symbol wherever he can. Because he knows that he cannot use all colors. The illustrations which are included in the Isaotta Guttadauro book are all in black and white, blue and white, orange and white. So he knew he didn't have many colors to play with, let's put it like that. And so he wanted them to be abundant in floral symbolism. And so here it is. Again, he had many influences that he wanted to include, not just pre-Raphaelite. On the left, I included Giulio Aristide Sartorio's Isaotta. So here you can see the protagonist of the book, who allegedly was created to honor his wife, Maria. And you can also see the interlude picture by Alessandro Morani. In both cases, they include an evanescent woman dressed in white, and they sort of pay homage to the Symphony in White by Whistler that you can see on the right, but also to the evanescent pre-Raphaelite women as the April Love by Arthur Hughes from 1855. I was particularly surprised when I saw this picture at Tate Gallery the first time many, many years ago, because it is nothing like this. The figure is hidden in the woods, exactly like the Nunzio does. And whereas I think the printed version always give us this very bright April Love painting, which isn't like this, or it isn't illuminated like this inside the Tate Gallery. So again, many different references, but he wants to make sure that the landscape and the flowers are always very well depicted and are always there. The background is not only a background, but it is very thought after and very important for the poem itself. Again, this on the illustration that you have on the left is by Vincenzo Cabianca, and it's included before a poem called Pastorale. It's one of those drawings where D'Annunzio wants to focus the reader's attention on the landscape more than on the protagonists. But I am 100% sure that Cabianca knew Love Among the Ruins by Edward Burne-Jones, and he decided to do something very interesting because he decided to zoom out on the lovers. So what we can see is the landscape. We can still see the menacing storm that they are sort of witnessing at the very moment. But you can see the light outside, which is pretty much what you have on the right with Love Among the Ruins. The two protagonists have a very dark background on the right, but there is light on the left. And as you can see, there is also a repetition of the floral pattern. And I tried to give you a zoomed in image so you can see it in Cabianca's drawing. So I, this might be the favorite, my favorite picture from the book. Not only because I love the painting by Bart Jones, but also for because of the majesty in having thought of zooming out and do something so modern to sort of honor the pre-Raphaelite influence. He decided to do something different, not just to copy the atmosphere, not just to copy the protagonists, but to present them in a different background. Very, very nice. Again, I think this is a painting that we know because I am sure Martin Beek has included it in his lectures a couple of times. On the right, sorry, you have John Inchbald in Early Spring, a study in March, which was painted in 1855. And on the left, again, you have Bosco Woods by Alessandro Morani. I'm not telling you about anything about the similarities of these two pictures because I am 100% sure Morani knew the original painting and decided to keep the flora as it was, because D'Annunzio was also adamant he didn't want the landscape to look particularly Italian, particularly British, particularly recognizable. Anyway, so he wanted these backgrounds to be enchanting and to represent a fairy tale world. But I am sure Morani knew the painted by Inchbold, and he decided it was so wonderful. He had to illustrate it and to suggest that it was the landscape Isaotta was living in. Again, very clever. To finish up, not only the pre-Raphaelites were present in Isaotta Guttadauro, which is interesting for later studies, but maybe not so pertinent sometimes because you will also find some expressionist illustrations or some illustrations like this, very much inspired by Japonism. Again, this is Giuseppe Cellini, which opens the April, which is what is called the April Sonnet, with a drawing which reminds us of Hokusai, the dream of the fisherman's wife, which is possibly the most well-known drawing or illustration from the Shunga period. So yeah, these illustrations make it very interesting, but they are sort of a bit outside the pre-Raphaelite world that D'Annunzio had in mind in the first place. So you actually have to also link them to the poems because they are pertinent, of course, with the poems. And the pre-Raphaelite drawings are more at the very beginning where you are encountering the protagonist for the first time, and she's a pre-Raphaelite woman, a pre-Raphaelite beauty, and so I do understand the reasons why they are all placed there. But afterwards, it also becomes something different, pioneeristic again, because Shunga wasn't so well known in Italy at the time, nor was very dark and gloomy landscape. So he decided to have an artwork which is pretty much very interesting to see to these days. And here it is, my version. As I said, I chosen the illustration where she opens the window and she opens the window to the readers, but you can also find the complete text for the Isaotta online. It is a free text. It is on the Internet Archive. So if you want to go through all the illustrations that I didn't have time to mention tonight, you can do it. And you can see them in their original colors. And I think you like make it. They're very, very beautiful. So thanks a lot for listening.